today's Friday Fundamental is going to cover off several things, and so I'm going to run them down just quickly so you know kind of the direction that we're going. I want to talk briefly about modes and navigating around the 3D. I'm going to talk about material assignments, whether that be, changing the brick. In this case, we're going to go to more of a manufactured stone, a different type of siding that's going to be on there, as well as different paint chips that you can select from, and then also your setup options, which will allow for things like reflections, control of textures, and we'll also throughout the entire model be talking about lighting. And so that's what we're trying to hopefully cover in 45 minutes. So as you can appreciate, there's not going to be a lot of or much drawing, because we're going to assume that the model itself has been created. And so what you have in front of you at this stage is, for all intents and purposes, a very just, the image is up, and the roof and lines, etc. work. But now what you want to do is you want to take it to that next level. How do I create something that I could maybe use for marketing on a web page, or even just to simply show off to the client? To get to this stage initially, you have to have put the work into the floor plan. And so you can see at this stage, I've just called up a simple drawing, and items that will go into creating a well-rounded 3D will include things like having the wall heights correct. And so in this case, if I change into profile mode, you will see that we have different wall heights, etc. So all of that needs to be modified. When you get the wall heights in there correctly, placing the floor system in, which will create the offset, okay, or vertical placement of that top plate. Of course, to go with that, once you have done that, you would then go in through the roof mode and be able to place the roof. And so all of that allows the model to work. If we don't get the wall heights correct, then we don't get the opportunity to put a correct roof on, and sometimes in that case the roof is going to fail, and then you've eliminated at least portions of the plan, if not the entire model, from being able to be viewed in 3D. Okay. Other modes that you will spend time in to create a reasonable 3D is going to include either interior and or room mode in conjunction. And when you place things like rooms, into a plan, you will see that as you place that room mode in there, you'll have the ability to assign things like wall covering, baseboard, flooring, and ceilings, etc. And I would recommend that if you're not familiar with this mode, go back to the Friday Fundamentals that we have online on our webpage, because I cover off these modes in the kitchen and bathroom Friday Fundamentals at more depth. For today's class, we're going to remain inside the model, but looking at it from an exterior perspective, which is where I'd like to spend our time. And so basically at this stage, if you wanted to create a 3D, you would stack the model in the order that you wish to view it. Now in this case, you'll see that I actually have a site plan that has been created, and this site plan, okay, has been input, and I've taken the time to, landscape it. Okay, there is actually a pool in the background, etc., for the model. And so the site plan would be placed, followed by the basement and or, crawl space, and then the main floor plan on top. And so once I have done that, I would then be able to go into the 3D views and be able to view the model. And so I could simply come in, and I won't hit all of these models or modes today, but I would encourage you to take a look at them. But if I jump into the visible line mode, and I'll just do a quick regenerate, what you see at this stage is it's exactly that. It's just simply lines on the screen. This is a great mode if you wanted to just simply create something for going in and doing your own watercoloring by hand, or just a simple title page, and you're not interested in having all of the textures, etc. Okay. Other modes that you may use would include the sketched mode. And so in the sketch mode, just clicking at it from the list of options that are down the left-hand side here, I can go in and take a look at the model. Now, each of these modes are going to have their own options that go with it. So when I am sitting in the sketch mode, I will be able to go into options and set up options. And what you'll see from the mode options is the listing of all of the modes that I can then go in and modify. So when I am in the sketched mode, I can then come in here to this and I can modify or change certain settings that would impact this mode specifically. So when you're taking a look at, for example, the line options, you could go in and you can actually, want to control what the thickness of the line is going to be, and if you will, how sketched or jagged almost that line is going to look like on the model. Okay, and so when you make that as an option setting, you can see now I've obviously thickened the line. Okay, so it almost looks like I've traced over it with more of a thick marker at this stage. Okay, bolding it out. And so these are found under the options and setup options, and I'll be able to go into each of those modes and even cross-reference them, okay, one to another, okay, as I'm working within the 3D. And so inside Sketched, I went into the face option, or sorry, the line options, and this is where I could, change the line thickness back. I could, decrease the amount of sketch, so to speak, that is being used or on the model itself. Now, all of these modes have the same options that are available to them. And so you could go into, the different face options, and you'll be able to assign things like, currently, as you can see, I'm displaying faces, but it's in a shaded mode as opposed to a textured mode, okay? You'll have the ability to go in and assign things like reflections, relief, depth, and emission. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we move more towards a textured or rendered image towards the end of this class. Okay, you'll be able to go in through the effects and assign things like fog and mist level depending on which mode that you're in. And as we talk about watercolor, I'll be able to assign different things like the brush size, which will either increase or decrease the amount of clarity to the model itself. Okay, lighting will be something that we'll do a lot of as far as textured and rendered is concerned. How bright the model is going to be and whether or not shadows are going to be cast, etc. But you can see even with shadows turned on inside the sketch mode, I'm actually getting them there. And if I turn something like that off, okay, as the model regenerates, it now becomes much flatter, so to speak, as far as the mode is concerned. Now, rather than opening up a whole series of tabs where I've got a sketch and an illustrated, etc., what I'm going to do at this stage is just from the mode selector in the upper right-hand corner, I can change mode or change the current mode that I'm viewing, with the model. So in this case, I'll change down to, let's say, illustrated. And so when I jump into illustrated mode, you can see this kind of pen and ink, stippling effect. This is, a kind of a different take on the model as well in the black and white. And so when I come into the setup options for this, I'm actually modifying the illustrated, if you will. And one of the things that I haven't touched on, at this stage, which applies to illustrated and clay and watercolor and textured and rendered, is what's called the anti-aliasing. And so by default, what this does is it goes in and it crisps the model, okay? It clarifies it. Now, as you enable the anti-aliasing, one of the things that you're going to do is it's going to, impact the speed at which you can, view the model or how it's going to be regenerated. So just by increasing that from a 0 to a 4, I've pretty much doubled the amount of time that it's going to take for this model to regenerate. But you can see the clarity, the fine line look of the model just by doing that. All right, so that's going to be applied, or something you're going to use as you get closer to the end of the model. When you're in a textured or a rendered, you're going to increase that anti-aliasing to allow the model to become that much clearer. But certainly this right here as it stands is something that you could use on a title page. You've got the shadows, you've got the lines, etc. I would print that out at this stage because it shows the the shapes of the house without getting bogged down in color of brick at this point. What we're looking at is, do we like the forms as opposed to, you know, some of the shadings of siding, et cetera, that we might use. And so again, if I go back into the setup options, and again, I'm working inside the illustrated. Okay, that was done under render and just increasing the anti-aliasing. Now again, inside the face options, you could come in and, you know, right now everything's just kind of monogrammed, but if I set this to textured, okay, you can see now I'm actually assigning textures. Now, it gets quite a bit darker as far as that goes, so there may be some things that we do with lighting, but that's just crisscrossing the different you know, options that you might be able to use to create, you know, kind of an artistic view of the house using the illustrated mode. And one last thing that I would take you into as far as the illustrated is concerned, so when I'm taking a look at the effects, right now I'm looking at it from a pen and ink option. So if I turn that off, at this stage now it enhances or adds the color. So now what I'm doing is I'm using more of a sketched view of this, and I've you know, superimposed or placed the textures on there, and you know, it moves into more of a colored mode. But again, we're not trying to get a photorealistic image as much as we're just, you know, creating an interpretation of the model from an artistic view. Okay, that is the illustrated. Quickly, clay model, when you take a look at it, it simply shows the model from a clay model perspective, if you will. Okay, again, some of the setup options could be assigned there, including anti-aliasing, which would, you know, allow you to go in and, you know, crisp up the image and so on. Watercolor mode, which, as I said, shows it more of a distorted, almost, you know, and this has clearly been done with a wide brush. And so here I could go into the watercolor mode, and on the effects, okay, I could go in and lower the brush size so it's a thinner brush, and even turn the wobble off. And so when I do that, which artificially kind of wobbles it, now we get again, an image from a watercolor perspective, but the clarity is intentionally distorted because, again, we're trying to create shapes and views from a different perspective, as you can see with the trees and so on. Okay, so we're looking more at the shapes of the house, you know, as opposed to, you know, narrowing it down to get a photorealistic image. Now, one of the modes you're going to spend a lot of time in is the textured mode, okay? And that's the mode that I've popped this into right away. And so when I get into the textured mode, all right, it applies bitmaps, JPEGs, you know, to the model, and, you know, and renders them onto the plan. And if my soft plan 2016 appears to be running faster than yours, that's because of the video card. Okay, so I would, you know, if you're investing in a system, you want to put that, you know, some of that investment into the video card, which will allow these things to regenerate faster, okay, for you. I want to talk about navigating around the model very quickly. Okay, so I'll spend just a few minutes here before we get into modifying some of the materials on there, because obviously I popped up and I've got a camera view that works really, really well. Okay, how did I get there? All right, so to do this, and I'm going to teach this from a sketched mode for right now, because this will generate much faster, and I can always go back to textured a little bit later. Okay, but down here in the lower left-hand corner, you have a 3D view, 3D camera, you know, dialogues that you can use. And so dealing with the one that's in the lower left-hand corner right here, I'll talk about that, you know, quickly. But what you've got in essence is when you go to navigate around this, you'll see these blue directional arrows, and they're pointing in towards the center of this blue circle right here. And as you click on these, what it will do is it's going to, you know, give you a view of the current model looking down from a 45-degree angle. And so as I click on this, it begins to rotate the model around, and you can see now we're looking at the backyard, and now we're looking at it from the left side, and so on, right? And so depending on which arrow you select will give you that view. Now, in addition to that, the red inner circle that is right here will allow you to not only create what camera angle that you want, but also the incline or the field of view that you're looking at, because currently everything is 45 degrees looking down. And so in this case, what basically the program does is when you click on this, it's going to alter the current view's incline of camera to focus point, all right, what you're focusing on. Now, obviously, we're hidden behind a bunch of trees right now, etc. But the key here is that it takes the current view and treats that as the front view, so to speak, when you're adjusting this. So if I want to go 90 degrees, okay, to the current view, then I would click here, and of course it looks at it from the right side and based on the incline of of the where I've clicked. And when you're clicking to get the incline, basically what I want you to think of this red circle is it's almost like a dome over your entire model. And so the closer you click to the top of the dome, the steeper the incline is going to be, and the closer that you click to the outer rim of that red dome, the less the incline is going to be. Now the key is, you'll notice, in order for me to change the incline of that, I actually moved my cursor from here down to the front almost view of how you would think of this. Because again, remember, the red circle on the 3D viewer treats the current view as that front view. So if I click over here, it's going to rotate me by 90 degrees and adjust that incline. Lastly, the blue circle is always kind of a top-down view. Okay, so that's what it's doing there. Now, the 3D camera control that you have right here is going to allow you to do several things. One, the plus and the minus is going to do just that, zoom you in and out. Okay, the up and down is exactly that. It's going to move you up and down relative to the current view, and then left and right does the same thing. These here are going to hold your camera stationary. In other words, you stay stationary and you turn your head. And so the focus point moves with it, okay? The control that you're going to use a lot of is this binocular right in the middle, which is a zoom to surface. And so when you click on this, you'll see it says down here at the bottom of the screen, select surface to look at. And when I click on that, it's going to zoom me in. Okay. Now, once I've zoomed in, I can then hold down the mouse wheel and I can actually, pan about and take a look at what it is I'm looking at. The arrow keys on the keyboard will do the similar thing to what the 3D camera control will allow me to do. In other words, the minus, this is pressing with the mouse, and then this is using the keyboard arrow keys. And so you can see, using a combination of those, I very quickly got myself back to the view that I was looking at. Now, you're going to get to stages within models where you're going to want to save current views, and I've already done that today. So you can go in through File and View File, and you can click Save, and at this stage, you can actually save your file name so that you could come back in, and as you rotate around and you've decided, I want to go back to the previous view I had, you could load it from here, or in this case, save it to whatever you want it to be. Okay, and so if I just type in X for right now, I've now saved this view. So if I click over here and I want to get that view back, I can come back in through File, View File, Load. In this case, I'll pick X, and when I do that, it takes me back to that camera view very quickly. And so, as we all know, sometimes this is a much better way or quicker way to load in those views, to be able to take the client through a couple of still shots, whether it's backyard, front yard, kitchen, etc. Okay, so that's something that you can do very quickly there. The last camera thing that I will show you right now is if you go to camera and you click on go to room. Now, if you've taken the time to input the room modes, and again, as I said, I talked about this in the kitchen Friday Fundamental, and that's been recorded and uploaded to the webpage. But if you click on camera and go to room, then you can actually select the rooms by name. Okay, so long as you went into room mode and you drew bedroom number 4 and placed it inside the model, you'll be able to go into, in this case, camera go to room and pick bedroom number 4. And we will take you inside that room, okay, and standing at the doorway to the room and looking in. And so you could literally go through a house very quickly just by selecting go to room and picking the room that you want to look at. And now I'm looking at the dining room. Okay, and again, I'm staying in sketch mode right now, but if I was in texture mode, I would then be able to see all the different finished rendered textures that go with this. So again, I'm going to go back to my file, my view file, load, and I'm going to go back outside to the view that I wanted to look at. Okay, so that's how you can get around the model very, very quickly within the plan. Now, as I say, we want to change, talk a little bit about changing textures in here. So in order to do that, we really do need to be inside the textured mode. And so that's where I've kind of popped into at this point. And, I might, still adjust my camera angles just a little bit to get us in, on the model. Some of the details that you will see once we jump into texture mode, which become a little, more clear, so to speak, is obviously the landscaping that is there. And if you take a look, there are two different types of trees that I've drawn on the site plan mode, okay? One is what are called, high surface count trees. These are literally three-dimensional trees that have been created where the trunk of the tree, the branches, each of the leaves, etc., they have all been crafted and sketched out. And so a tree like this, in terms of its number of surfaces and detail, is very high. All right, so the more of these you add, they're very detailed, but they can at some point hit a tipping point where they begin to slow the regeneration. The second kind of landscaping that I've got on the model for today is what's called a billboard tree. Now these tend to have a little less detail because what we're really doing is we're just pasting a picture of a tree onto a single plane. And so that tree, and then we cut out the if you will, the background on that tree there. This tree has basically two surfaces, front, back, and so it regenerates much faster as opposed to a tree over here, which may arbitrarily just say have several hundred surfaces on it. And so as you can see, I could draw 200 of these trees to equal one of these trees in terms of surfaces, for example. And so I tend to use a combination of these. You'll find that you'll want to take the high surface trees and maybe place them in front, as I have done down here, and then I may use these billboard trees to kind of fill in the backgrounds that are there. Okay, now as I jump into my my three-dimensional model, let's talk a little bit about editing surfaces and so on. And so you can come in through the edit and you can select surface edit, and you could then pick in this case, I've selected the red brick. And so when I do that and it pulls this up, this is going to allow me to now go in and modify or change a different, pick a different bitmap or JPEG, and have it assigned to the model. And so regardless of which one I select, that's back to the red that was there, you can see the model updating. Now there are several, thousands of textures that are in there, and you can certainly copy and put your own in, as you see fit. And I'm just going to go in through several, choices that I'm comfortable with for today to simply teach you. And so I'm going in through the manufacturers. And this is key because you'll find that as you contact and reach out to your various manufacturers, they want you using their images inside your CAD software. And so you should be able to contact them, and they'll either provide you a download, or they may send you a DVD with these on, and you'll be able to copy this directly into your 3D textures folder and be able to use their actual material. So in my case, I've gone to manufacturer, and then I'm going into soft plan, and I'm selecting this Eldorado library that's right here, and that's going to allow me to now go in and select what I want to use for a texture on the exterior model. And so you can see that it's now being applied to that. Now, in addition to selecting that texture, I'll then be able to go into options and modify certain things. And I'm going to run through these fairly quickly, but hopefully, you can always go back and review this, after the fact, because we are recording this video to upload. But you'll be able to go in and modify the ambient, which is the brightness of the individual texture. If the material has a shiny or matte finish, that's controlled by diffuse. Okay. Most of the textures that you scan in are going to have, visible highlights. That's controlled by the specular, so it's sitting at 0. So if I increase that, I'm going to see those highlights, begin to pop out of the stone, okay? Opacity controls how transparent a texture is. Well, stone isn't, so it sits at 100. But if you're doing glass or you're doing water for a swimming pool, you might lower that down to 35 so that you can see through the texture, but you still can apply things like reflections to it. So that's there. Okay, relief depth. This is something where you can go in, and it's basically called bump mapping. And so what you can do is you can have the image itself artificially create, depth to it, so that when light hits it, you can see shadows and so on. So all of that is going to be there. And of course, there are several items down here which will control the orientation of it with the rotate and inverting an image should you scale your own in there. But once you have assigned this to the model, you can click OK, and it's going to be applied. Now, once I have selected an individual texture that I'm going to use, I might want to come in and copy and paste that. As you can see, the coin corners, certainly we want something different. Now, maybe we want to have the exact same stone, or there may be the option of wanting to go in and apply like a stucco or something like that to it. But in either case, I either edit this using the surface edit, which I just did, or in my case, I'm going to go to surface copy paste, and I'm just going to copy and paste so it's the same option that's there. Okay, so that's just going in and assigning the texture to this. Now I'm going to assign a few other textures to this model quickly. I could come in here and do a surface edit, wanting to get the actual siding itself. And so I did a surface edit a moment ago and grabbed the wrong thing. So here what I've done is I'm just selecting with a right click. It sees 2x6 in siding, so I can come down here now and pick surface edit. And from here, again, I might come into the texture options, and I'm very likely, again, I tend to gradually go towards the manufacturers. They give me the higher quality images that are there. They're also, I'm actually now using materials that I can actually call out specifically. And so in this case, I'm just going to go to vertical siding and the groove, and now I could select from this option that are here what it is I want to use. And so as I just go down, I can click and take a look at what that option is going to be. And as you can see, it's assigned to the model, so I can get kind of a preview there automatically. Okay, and you could once again go into the options and control the ambient light or the ambience as far as the brightness is concerned, and so on the model. And so I will just click OK and have that assigned. Now the last thing that you might want to do in a model like this is go in and assign paint colors or textures to it. So in this case here, this white that I'm using, on the gutters and the eaves and the fascias and so on, you could actually just go in and select from the actual color swatches that are supplied by SoftPlan. And so in this case, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to click on, and I'm just going to make sure I get the right thing. So let's do it right over here, which will make it, and I'll pick a surface edit on the fascia. And when I click on texture color, you will see that I've got down below here all of the different colors that are available. And so you can, if I were to click the down arrow key, you can see I've got the Benjamin Moores and I got the Sherwin-Williams and other colors that are there, and you'd be able to actually go in and select from any of these textures that you wanted to use. And this is something you'll do on the interiors as well. As you paint rooms, you'll be able to go in and select literally from these paint chips, okay, and it would actually, that's a color that you could then order, so the client can go through and show you the paint chips they want to paint rooms, and you'll be able to just go in and assign that to the various rooms that are there. And so in this case, if I stick with the Benjamin Moore Affinity Color Series, and I'm just going to come down here and select this as my tan color that will match kind of the siding and the stone that's there, and I'm just going to come in and I'm actually going to zoom this up so that I don't miss per se, because I can always go back in just a minute, but I can now come in through surface copy paste and pick this and apply it to the gutter lines, to the frieze board, etc. I could even assign it to the window trim if that's something that I wanted to do, etc. Okay, on the actual model. And so I'm going to also pick up, and I'm just using a combination of the arrow keys, holding down the mouse wheel, etc., in order to get myself in a position that'll for the the camera angle that I want to see. And so this gets me in a to a point where, okay, I'm, at this stage, I'm getting fairly happy with, the color selections. We're going to go in and play with some light sources here in just a second. I'll do a surface copy paste and maybe assign to the spindles, a white, just to set that up. And so with that done, let me just go in through my back myself up, and I'm using the camera mode here. And so, and I've specifically placed certain things in certain areas, so that, and this is just, a little bit of experience that comes into play, but the tree overhanging, etc., that's just coming back into the site plan mode, and I've placed certain trees in certain areas, for my camera so that I get that, overhanging there, just so if you're wondering where, that came from, etc. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the lighting and so on that we're doing on the model. If I come in through options and again I go to setup options, and this time I'm going to go to texture. Okay, and so as I come into the renderer, once again the anti-aliasing, as I take that up, it is going to increase, all right, the clarity and the the realism of the model, on the plan. So these stone textures, etc., are going to be painted with a finer brush, so to speak. All right. The line option is not applicable because at this stage I'm really talking about a textured model, not a sketched model. But if I did want the corners outlined, I could certainly come in and turn this display on, and the lines would be highlighted, if you will, on the corners, so to speak. Inside the face options, we're now getting into enabling the relief depth, okay? If it's enabled and I've modified it on the stone texture to be used, it's going to begin to assign that, all right? In the case of reflections, that would, maybe if I've turned it on in the glass, it's going to allow me to, see reflections of the trees, etc., in the glass itself. All right. I'm not going to have any kind of fog or mist on this, nor am I playing with the watercolors at this stage. So now we move on to lighting. Now, one of the biggest things that I will see with people when they're working with it is the model is too dark, and so what they tend to do is they come in and they increase the ambient light, and I would try to when you're getting towards the end of the model, at the very least, push you away from not doing that, because the ambient light is really just going to go in and artificially light the entire model, and as opposed to, especially in interior rooms, etc., where you may want to just go in and add more light sources, pot lights, and turning on the brightness of the individual light sources, etc. So that's going to, the ambient light just basically brightens the overall model top to bottom, okay? The ambient occlusion that you've got down here, which is currently enabled at this stage, just basically adds more realistic shading to the actual model itself. So turning this on is going to add depth, if you will, okay, with the lighting itself. The headlight that you see right here, the best way that I could, describe that is that, you've got like a point light. It's almost like a miner's hat, and you've got a light shining from where you're standing, okay? And so lighting the direction that you're looking that's there, okay? You'll see that I've got shadows turned on, okay? And so that's a true option. And then lastly, where the sky is coming from is, that's actually been added from the backgrounds. And so you can go in and turn that on for any of the models that are there, and so when you do that, you can select from the different models that are available, okay? And so once you have done that, the texture model is now going to regenerate at this stage. Because I increased the anti-aliasing and I began to play with the lighting a little bit, you can see the stonework, etc., has become that much more crisp, okay, and begins to pop out. Now, a big thing that you will play a lot with is the sun option. Now, the sun option, okay, right now I am dealing with a noon time, here from a central standpoint. And I'll be able to actually go in and select the city that I want to place this in. So certainly noon in Nashville versus noon in Calgary is going to be a completely different feel because one's much more north, obviously, than the other. But in addition to that, you'll be able to also come in and select the calendar year. So if you're picking, if you're doing like what is it going to look like in June for that pool that's in the backyard, we could create shadows and so on, which are going to be important. And then we can also take a look at it, what it's going to look like in December, maybe when the pool's not in use, but where's that sun going to hit on the house itself. You'll be able to, go in and change the time of day. So when I do this and I change this to 4 o'clock, shadows are going to change, obviously, because I've changed the time of day, by 4 hours, and they may begin to get longer, etc., and going in different directions. You can also play with this, where you come in, and if I change this, as I begin to, increase this to 6, you can see at 7 p.m. in September here in Nashville, the sky has gone below the horizon. And so I'm going to change that to 6, which is going to, at this stage get much, much darker because we're moving towards, dusk on here. And this is where you can certainly see the shadows begin to pop, okay? And so I could come into here, and if I was trying to get some sort of a sunset type option, I might come in and even play around with, the colors, the color hue on here. And so when I do that, I've actually, modified the sun color, to more of an orange. And so now what we're going for is more of that, later dusk evening, burning red sun, kind of, shining onto the house itself. And that certainly adds more depth. It's visually adds a little more, different kind of perspective to this, etc. Other light sources that you can modify with this would include the individual, lights that you've got on here. So I'm going to do this from within the main floor plan, and I'm going to change into the electrical mode for just 1 second and zoom this up. And when I edit this light source right here, you'll see that, this, which has been, picked and drawn out of the, exterior lights, it has the option of coming in to the lights option and modifying, the individual brightness of said light. So if I'm trying to create something that is a, brighter light on here, and if I look at it from a 3D perspective, you can actually see the light sources themselves, but that's going to impact the 3D as well, so that we begin to brighten, certain areas. And this is what I say, rather than using the ambient light to brighten the overall model, go in and modify the individual light sources and turn the wattage up, so to speak, for that light so that you can actually see it. Okay? Now, as we move towards kind of the conclusion of this, Friday Fundamental, I want to take you in and just, play with this inside a rendered, mode. Now, rendered itself is going to, it adds more time to the regeneration on the model, okay, because it really has to go in now, and it's going to calculate all of the light sources. It's going to bounce the shadows, etc. But this is where you're going to take it when you're talking about creating something that you are, you want a photorealistic image on. And so this can take some amount of time in order to crank this out, and it's certainly something that you want to have set up, and you can begin to see my renderer is now cranking through and rendering this on screen. Now, as this is rendering and running this through, let's talk a little bit about, I did a bunch of texture assignments on here, okay? And these texture assignments that I have done, I may want to use them again down the road. And similar to what I did with the camera angle, where I did a file, view file, save, and I created that one called X, right? And I loaded it, okay, to get me back to the front view. I could do the same thing with the material files, where I could save this stone with this paint pattern with this siding, and that's called saving a material file. And I've already done one, so I want to take the time just to show you. You would and I've stopped the renderer at this point, but you would basically come in through File, and you could select Material File, and you could then select Save. Now, I've created one called 3D, FF for Friday Fundamental, but you could literally go in here and save that as, whatever you wanted to call that, and you would type in the name. And so down the road, I would come in through File, Material File, Load, and I could select the 3D, the one I saved. In my case, I saved this one yesterday, okay, in advance of the class. And so now I'm just going to, load up those same textures, etc., okay, with all of my options being set. And it would go in, and I could load that material file onto any three-dimensional model that I have created. So it doesn't need to be this one, as long as it has the same, let's say, exterior surface called stone or brick right here. And if it's siding A, it's going to load that siding onto there, and so on. And so that would be applied to your actual model itself. And so this is just going to go through here and begin the rendering process. And I may, again, stop this in just a moment in order to go in and modify a few things like, the sun and the shadows, etc., okay, as far as the model is concerned. So I'm going to stop it for 1 second. I'm going to come into the sun options. I'm going to change this back to a white, if you will. And I'm going to go into the renderer, okay, and I'm just going to lower this renderer. 2 is fine. And I want to go to one other thing that is, under lighting, when you're in a rendered mode, you'll be able to go in and calculate all shadows, okay? If you lower this down to no shadows or limited shadows, it's going to render a little bit faster, okay, as far as it goes, but obviously you're giving up some amount of detail there. One other option that I tend to use a bit of is I actually turn off soft shadows. So this is kind of soft shadows right here, and I've turned it off at this stage for the renderer, and by doing that, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create very hard shadows, reflecting onto the house, so to speak, based on where my sun is. So you see the outline of the trees, etc. And when you do that, it creates some, interesting sight lines, for the model itself. And so this is just going to go through now, and it's creating those shadows. And of course, it's changing this, some of the sun colors, and et cetera, that we have, because I changed this from that orange to that white. Okay, and what you're going to see in just a few moments is this tree right here is going to begin to, cast some. I can see soft shadows right here, but we'll begin to see some hard shadows, kind of going up onto the house itself, as far as the image is concerned. Now, we've done a lot in 40 minutes, and that's all it's taken. Now, obviously, there was a lot of things in place as far as the house is concerned with the details. Okay, again, I go back to wall definitions being correct and the heights being correct on the model itself. Okay, the site plan was done, and I'd already put the landscaping in, etc. So that came into play. All right, and then I've just gone in and I've just taken the defaults that were the all of these textures that we've got here, and just picked from all of the ones that shipped with the software. So there was nothing special that I loaded in today that you don't already have. These are just SoftPlan and SoftPlan Plus textures and paint patterns that shipped with the software. And so as you can begin to see here, in 45 minutes, which is what this is going to turn out to be, we have very quickly created an image that really does show off, at this stage, later in the day with shadows and light sources, the model itself. And as you can begin to see, we've got, obviously some long shadows that are casting onto the house itself from all of the trees that are around it, so that you can see the reflections that are taking place, in particular this window right here, because I have the reflections turned on. All right, and so this is the sort of thing that I would be able to, if I wanted to at this stage, save this out and print it. Now, that's where I'm going to end this class with, is just teaching you how do I get this to a point where I want to print, because when I hit File and Print here, it doesn't necessarily show or print with the same clarity as what I was hoping for. What you're going to want to do is actually save the model as an off-screen bitmap, okay? And so when you go to output this mode, all right, what you will do is you will simply come into Options and select that you want to output the option. Now, to this stage, I've been creating a still image. And so what you would do is simply select Output to File, all right, and you would pick the image size. Now, realistically, right now, I have an image, screen, so to speak, right now that is, 1900 over, 1200 or something along that lines, okay? So you can obviously see if I went to 2048 by 1536, that's a higher resolution. If I take it to 4096 by 3072, I've more than doubled the resolution that I'm now rendering this image out to. And so if you take the time to render that out to this higher image, and then using whatever your third-party software is that you're using to create or print the image out, okay, you're going to get that much more depth to your model itself. When we put together our posters for, when we're at the International Builders Show or other shows around, we're printing those to off-screen bitmaps or off-screen images, and then, outputting those to files for printing. And so that's what you're going to want to do as far as the still images are concerned. So once you've selected this and you press OK and you hit regenerate, it's then going to prompt you at that point for what the what the file name is going to be. Guys, that is 45 minutes. We tried to hit as much as we possibly could in a shorter period of time. As I said, it was very ambitious. I do hope that you got a lot out of this. I have recorded this, so I will be posting this to the webpage early next week once I've had the opportunity to convert it and edit it and so on. And so you'll be able to review this as well.